You. Hi. I'm Sarah. Today I'm going to read you the story of Leslie, which is titled like this. Mom handed me their new will. Everything will go to Mark and his kids. You won't get a single cent. I smiled. Then don't expect a single cent from me. I left and did what I should have done a long time ago. Then their lives turned. Well, let's go. My name is Leslie, and I'm 36 years old. I work for this huge international trading company as head of the VIP client department. Yeah, I know it sounds fancy, but basically I deal with the big fish. The clients who drop serious money with us, and let me tell you, they pay me well for it. Real well. I didn't just stumble into this job either. I busted my ass for years to get here. College. Then more college. Then working Zestic hour weeks. Climbing that corporate ladder one rung at a time. Now I've got my own house in a nice neighborhood. A Mercedes that purrs like a kitten. And a bank account that would make most people's eyes water by any normal person. Standards. I've got it made. But here's the thing. My parents don't see it that way. Not even close. Every single time I visit them, it's the same song and dance. Leslie. When are you going to settle down, Leslie? You're not getting any younger. Leslie. Don't you want children? It's like they can't see past the fact that I don't have a ring on my finger. They love throwing my older brother Mark in my face. Mark's 38. Married Sarah right after college. And they've got 4 kids. Tommy, who's 15. Jake, who's 13. Little Emma, who's 9. And baby Lily, who's 6. My parents worship those kids. I swear they light up like Christmas trees whenever Mark brings them over. And don't get me started on Sarah, Mark's wife. She's got this way of tilting her head and giving me this pitying smile. Whenever we're all together, you know, Leslie, she'll say in this sweet voice that makes my teeth itch, I have this cousin who's single. He's got a good job. Really nice guy. I could introduce you to. I always smile back and say something like, that's so sweet of you to think of me. But I'm really focused on my career right now. What I want to say is, mind your own damn business. But I was raised better than that. The funny thing is, while they're all sitting there judging my life choices, they sure don't mind taking my money. And boy, do they take it? It started about 3 years ago when Dad called me up, sounding all stressed out. Leslie, honey, we're having some trouble with the mortgage payment. Your mom's been having health issues. And I had to take time off work. Of course I said yes. I mean, they're my parents. Right. So I started making their mortgage payments. All of them. Every month for 3 years. But it didn't stop there. Oh. No. That would be too simple. Next thing they know, I'm paying their electric bill, their gas bill, their water bill. Then Dad mentions how slow their internet is. So I get them hooked up with the premium package. Then Mom starts talking about how she saw this smart home thing on television. And wouldn't it be nice if she could just tell the microwave to start heating up dinner? So I bought them all new appliances. The Works smart refrigerator, smart dishwasher, smart microwave, smart washer and dryer. The whole house is connected now. They can control everything with their voices. Mom loves showing it off to her friends. Watch this, she'll say, and then call out, microwave, heat up my coffee. And when it beeps, all her friends go and are like, she's some kind of magician. What they don't tell their friends is who paid for all of it. That part never seems to come up. And then there's Mark. He needed help with his car loan. So guess whose name is on the paperwork? Mine. I also added him and my parents to my car insurance, because family should look out for each other. The kids needed money for their activities. Soccer, piano lessons, summer camp. Who do you think pays for that? And when the whole family wants to go on vacation, well, good old Leslie covers the hotel and plane tickets. I tell myself it's fine. I can afford it. And family is family. But sometimes I lie awake at night, trying to remember the last time any of them said thank you. I mean, really said it. Not just a quick thanks before asking for the next thing. I can't remember a single time, but that's just how they are, I guess. They're not big on thank yous. Last month, I made the final mortgage payment on their house. 3 years of payments. And it was finally done. The house was theirs. Free and clear. I called Mom to tell her the good news. Mom, I just made the last payment on your mortgage. The house is all yours now. She squealed like a teenager. Oh, Leslie, that's wonderful. We have to celebrate. I'll cook all your favorite dishes. Come over Saturday. Mark and Sarah are coming too. It'll be perfect timing. I showed up at my parents' house around 6, carrying a bottle of wine. The smell of Mom's pot roast hit me as soon as I walked through the door. And for a second, I almost forgot about all the family drama. Mark's car was already in the driveway, so I knew they'd beaten me. There. I walked into the dining room and there they all were. Mark looking smug as usual. Sarah with that fake smile plastered on her face, and the 4 kids arguing over who got to sit where Dad carved the roast while Mom bustled around, making sure everyone had enough of everything. She'd really gone all out. Pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans, her famous dinner rolls and apple pie for dessert. It was like Thanksgiving in April. So Dad said, settling into his chair, "This is a special day. Our house is finally ours. Thanks to Leslie," Mark said. But there was something weird in his voice, like he was reading from a script. "Yes," Mom said, glancing at Dad. "Thanks to Leslie." The kids were too busy eating to pay attention to the adults. But I noticed Mark and Sarah exchanging looks. They kept doing it throughout dinner, like they were having some kind of silent conversation. After we finished eating, Mom got up to clear the plates before we had dessert. She said, "Your father and I have something we want to tell everyone." She walked over to the sideboard and picked up a manila folder. My stomach dropped. Nothing good ever came from manila folders at family dinners. "What's going on?" I asked. But Mom just smiled and sat back down. "Well," she said, opening the folder, "your father and I went to see Mr. Peterson at his law office last week." Mr. Peterson was the family lawyer. He'd handled my parents' wills years ago. Back when I was in college, we decided it was time to update our will. Dad said, "You know, make sure everything is in order." I looked around the table. The kids were still eating, completely oblivious. Mark and Sarah were sitting perfectly still, watching my parents like they were at a movie theater. "We've been thinking a lot about the future," Mom continued, "and what's best for the family." She pulled out a document and set it on the table. I could see the lawyer's letterhead from where I was sitting. "We've decided," she said, looking straight at me, "that when we pass away everything, we have the house, our savings, Everything will go to Mark and his children. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I sat there staring at her, waiting for the part where she mentioned me, but she just kept talking. We know you're doing well for yourself. Leslie, you've got your career, your house, your savings. You don't need anything from us. And Mark has 4 children to think about. Dad added college funds, weddings, all those expenses. It just makes sense. I finally found my voice. Wait. What? You're cutting me out of the will completely. Mom didn't even flinch. We're not cutting you out. Honey, we're just being practical. You don't have children to provide for. You don't need the money. But I started, then stopped. My brain was trying to process what was happening. Did you do this on purpose? Wait until after I paid off your mortgage. The question hung in the air like a bad smell. Mom and Dad looked at each other, but neither of them looked embarrassed or ashamed. If anything, Mom looked annoyed that I was making a big deal out of it. Leslie, she said in that patient voice she used when I was a kid and having a tantrum. You need to understand that family means helping each other. You're in a position to help, so you help. That's what family does. But you're literally telling me that I'm not getting anything when you die because I already have money. Money that I earned. Money that I used to help you. Sarah cleared her throat. Leslie, I think you're overreacting. Your parents are just trying to be fair. I turned to look at her. She had this smug expression on her face like she just won something fair. I said, "How is this fair?" "Well," Sarah said, adjusting her position in her chair, "Mark and I have been struggling financially. We've got 4 kids, and you know how expensive everything is these days. You're single. No kids making good money. You don't really need an inheritance. Plus," Mark added, "you've always been the successful one. You've got your fancy job, your nice house. We're just trying to make ends meet." I felt something, a heart rising in my chest. Are you kidding me right now? I've been paying your mortgage for 3 years. Leslie, Mom said, I think you need to calm down. This is supposed to be a celebration. I stood up from the table. No, I'm not going to calm down. This is unbelievable. I've been financially supporting all of you for years. And now you're telling me that I'm not worth including in your will because I'm too successful. You're being dramatic. Sarah said, maybe you should talk to someone. A therapist or something. This level of anger isn't healthy. I stared at her. You want to talk about healthy? If I'm such a terrible person who doesn't deserve to be in your will, why do you all keep taking my money? The table went dead silent. Mark looked down at his plate. Sarah's face turned red. Mom and Dad just stared at me. I looked around the table at all of them. My family. The people I'd been supporting for years. The people who just told me I wasn't worth their inheritance because I was too successful. You know what I said? I'm going to remember this. All of it. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door behind me. I could hear Mom calling my name, but I didn't turn around. I walked out of that house and slammed the door as hard as I could. The drive home was a blur. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, and I kept replaying the conversation in my head. They'd planned this. They'd waited until I paid off their mortgage, then dropped this bomb on me. When I got home, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my couch staring at the wall. I felt angry and hurt and stupid all at the same time. How had I not seen this coming? But mostly I felt done. Just completely done with all of them. I woke up the next morning with a headache and a bad taste in my mouth. The wine hadn't helped, and neither had the 3 hours I'd spent lying in bed, replaying every word from dinner. But something had changed overnight. The hurt was still there, but it was getting pushed aside by something else. Something that felt a lot like determination. I wasn't going to just take this lying down. I called my lawyer first thing Monday morning. David Morrison had handled my house purchase and set up my will, so I figured he'd know about this kind of thing. "Leslie," he said when I explained the situation, "I'm sorry this happened to you. Family disputes over money are never easy. But is there anything I can do, I mean? I paid their mortgage for 3 years. Doesn't that count for something?" David was quiet for a minute. "The problem is, you weren't a co-borrower on the mortgage. Your name isn't on any of the paperwork. Legally, you were just making voluntary payments on someone else's debt." My heart sank. So I'm screwed. Not necessarily. Think about it this way. You've been supporting them financially in multiple ways. Right. What if you just stopped? I'm just saying. If someone told me I wasn't worth including in their will, I might reconsider how generous I was being with my money. A slow smile spread across my face. "David, you're a genius." I hung up the phone and pulled out my laptop. Time to make some calls. First, I called Comcast. "Hi. I need to cancel the internet service at 428 Maple Street. Can I ask why you're canceling? I'm not paying for it anymore." Next, I called Smart Home Solutions. "I need to cancel the service contract for 428 Maple Street." "Ma'am, if you cancel the contract, none of the appliances will work. They're all connected to our system." "I understand. Cancel it." The customer service rep tried to talk me out of it, but I was done. My parents wanted to act like I didn't matter. Fine. Let them see how much I didn't matter. Then I called Toyota Financial Services. "I need to discuss the loan for the 2022 Camry. How can I help you? I want to return the car. I'm not making any more payments." "Ma'am, are you sure? You'll need to arrange for the vehicle to be picked up." "Schedule it." I don't care when I went through my bank account and canceled every automatic payment that had anything to do with my family. The kids' soccer fees, piano lessons, summer camp deposits. All of it gone. Then I called my insurance company. "I need to remove some people from my policy. Who would you like to remove?" "Mark Thompson, Linda Thompson, and Robert Thompson." "That's quite a few people. Can I ask why? They're not my problem anymore." It took me about 2 hours to undo 3 years of financial support with each phone call. I felt lighter. Like I was shedding weight I didn't even know I was carrying. The next morning, my phone started ringing. I was at work trying to focus on a presentation when I saw Mom's name on the screen. I hit decline. She called back immediately. Decline again. Then Dad called. Decline. Then Mark. Decline. By lunch, I had 17 missed calls. That's when the text started. "Mom. Leslie. Nothing is working in the house. The internet is down and all the appliances stopped working. Call me back. Dad. What did you do? The television won't turn on and the dishwasher is dead. Mark. They came and took my car. They took my car. Call me back right now. Sarah. This is childish. Your parents are elderly, and you're acting like a spoiled brat." I deleted every single text without responding. Let them figure it out. That evening, I was home making dinner when my doorbell rang. I looked through the people and saw all 4 of them standing on my porch. "Mom. Dad. Mark and Sarah. They looked pissed. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. "What do you want?" Mom pushed past me into the house. "We need to talk." "I don't think we do." "Leslie," Dad said, following Mom inside. "This has gone too far. Your mother can't even cook dinner. None of the appliances work." "The repairman came out," Mom said, and I could see tears in her eyes. "He said we need to replace everything. All of it. Do you know how much that's going to cost?" "Not my problem," I said. Mark stepped forward. "Leslie, I need my car back. I have to get to work." "I should have thought of that before you decided I wasn't worth including in the will." Sarah crossed her arms. "This is exactly what I was talking about. You're being vindictive and cruel. Your parents are suffering because of your tantrum." My tantrum. I felt that familiar heat rising in my chest. "You want to talk about suffering? I've been paying for all of your lives for 3 years. And what did I get for it? A big, fat, nothing in the will, and a lecture about how I need to find a husband. We never asked you to pay for everything," Mom said. "Bullshit. Every time you called me, it was about money. The mortgage, the utilities, the internet, the appliances. And every time I said yes, because I thought you were grateful, because I thought I was helping my family." "You were helping your family. Dad said that's what family does." "No," I said, walking to my front door and opening it. "That's what ATMs do. And I'm done being your ATM. Leslie, please." Mom said we can work this out. Maybe we can change the will. Maybe. I laughed. "You think maybe is good enough. You waited until I paid off your mortgage to screw me over. And now you want to negotiate." "It's not like that," Mark said. "It's exactly like that. You're all leeches. You've been sucking money out of me for years. And the second I'm not useful anymore, you cut me loose." "That's not true." Sarah said, "We appreciate everything you've done." "Really? When did you appreciate it? Because I can't remember a single thank you from any of you." They all stood there looking at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. Maybe I'd finally lost it. And this was what sanity felt like. "Get out," I said. "All of you. Get out of my house and don't come back. You made it clear that I'm not getting a cent from you when you die. Well, guess what? You're not getting a cent from me while you're alive." I stood there, holding the door open until they finally left. Mark was the last one out, and he turned around like he wanted to say something. "Don't," I said. "Just don't." I slammed the door behind them and locked it. Then I poured myself a glass of wine and sat down at my kitchen table. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't worried about anyone else's bills. I wasn't stressed about mortgage payments or utility bills or car loans. I was free. The first few weeks after cutting them off were blissfully quiet. I threw myself into work with renewed energy, without the constant stress of managing everyone else's finances. I could actually focus on my job. I landed 2 new major clients and got praise from my boss for my performance. My bank account started growing again, instead of being constantly drained. But the silence from my family didn't last forever. About a month after our confrontation, my cousin Rachel called me. Rachel was my mom's sister's daughter, and she'd always been the family gossip. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Leslie," she said, "I heard about what happened with your parents. Your mom called my mom crying. She said you cut off their internet and broke all their appliances, and that Mark's car got repossessed." I almost laughed. "Is that what she told you?" She said you were being vindictive because they didn't put you in their will. But, Leslie, there has to be more to it than that. Rachel was fishing for information, but I decided to give her the whole story. Why not? If my parents were going to spread their version around the family, I might as well tell the truth. Rachel, I paid their mortgage for 3 years. Every month. Without fail. I paid their utilities. Bought them all new appliances. Paid for Mark's car. His insurance. His kids' activities. I basically supported the entire family financially. Wait. Your mom never mentioned any of that? Of course she didn't. They took my money for years. Then the minute I finished paying off their mortgage, they announced they were cutting me out of the world because I was too successful to need an inheritance. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. Holy shit. Leslie. That's messed up. Yeah. It is. So I stopped paying for everything. If I'm not worth including in their will, then I'm not worth supporting financially. Good for you. Rachel said. I can't believe they did that to you. Word spread fast through the family network. Over the next few weeks, I heard through various relatives about the fallout from my decision. My parents had to completely gut their kitchen. Without the smart home system, all their fancy appliances were useless. They had to buy the cheapest replacements they could find. And even then, they couldn't afford to renovate the whole kitchen. Half of it was still torn up because they ran out of money. My dad, who hadn't worked in over a year. I had to get a job at the hardware store at 64 years old. He was back to working retail, lifting boxes and dealing with customers. Mom complained to everyone who would listen about how embarrassing it was. Mark was struggling too. He bought some beat-up old Honda that was constantly breaking down. The kids had to quit their soccer teams and piano lessons because Mark and Sarah couldn't afford them anymore. Sarah had to get a part-time job at Target to help make ends meet. The whole family was talking about Mark and Sarah maybe moving in with my parents to save money on rent for kids in that little house with their grandparents. Good luck with that. My cousin Janet called me one day laughing. Leslie, you should have seen your mom at the grocery store yesterday. She was complaining to Mrs. Henderson about how ungrateful you are. And Mrs. Henderson just looked at her and said, Well, Linda, if my daughter had been paying my mortgage for 3 years, I think I'd be pretty grateful. What did Mom say to that? She turned red and walked away. I think word is getting around about what really happened. I felt a little bad about that. I didn't want to humiliate my parents, but I also wasn't going to let them paint me as the villain in this story. A few months later, I ran into Mark at the grocery store. He looked tired. Older. Somehow. His clothes were wrinkled and he needed a haircut. Hey, he said awkwardly. Hey yourself. We stood there for a moment. I'm not sure what to say. Finally, he spoke up. The kids ask about you sometimes. They don't understand why you don't come around anymore. Maybe you should explain it to them. He looked down at his card, which was full of generic brands and discount items. Leslie, I know we messed up Mom and Dad. They didn't handle it right. But cutting us off completely, that's pretty harsh. I stared at him. You know what's harsh? Mark, taking someone's money for years and then telling them they're not worth including in your will. That's harsh. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something else. But I pushed my cart past him and walked away. I didn't have anything else to say to him. 6 months after cutting them off, I was doing better than I had in years. My stress levels were down. My bank account was up, and I was actually enjoying my life again. I'd started dating someone I met through work. A nice guy named David, who didn't need me to pay his bills or fix his problems. I bought myself a new car, a beautiful red Audi convertible. I took a vacation to Italy. Something I'd been putting off for years because I was always worried about having enough money for my family's emergencies. The best part was not having to worry about anyone else's problems. No more late-night calls about broken appliances or overdue bills. No more stress about whether I could afford to help with some new crisis. My money was my own again. I heard through the grapevine that my parents were still struggling. Dad's job at the hardware store wasn't paying enough to cover all their expenses. And they were talking about selling the house and moving to a smaller apartment. The house I paid off for them. Did I feel bad about it? Sometimes they were my parents. After all, but then I remembered that dinner. The way they'd looked at me when they announced I was getting nothing in the well. The way they justified it by saying I was too successful, too well off to single to deserve anything. I remembered years of taking my money without a single thank you. Years of judging my life choices while living off my success. Years of treating me like an ATM instead of a daughter. No. I didn't feel bad. I felt free. The only thing that I regretted was not doing it sooner. I should have cut them off the first time they took my money without showing any gratitude. I should have realized that they saw me as a resource. Not a person. But I knew better now. And I was never going back to being anyone's ATM again. My money. My life. My rules. Finally. You. Hi. I'm Sarah. Today I'm going to read you the story of Veronica, which is titled like this. My family laughed while I lived in a hellhole and ate ramen. Now I own a big house, and they showed up uninvited. But instead of congratulations, I heard it's wonderful for your sister and her family. I smiled and made one call. Well, let's go. My name is Veronica, and I guess you could say I've always been the backup kid in my family. My sister Jessica is 4 years older than me. And from the day I was born, she's been the star of the show. I'm not even kidding when I say I got everything she didn't want anymore. When I was 7 and Jessica was 11, she got a brand new iPhone for her birthday. What did I get? 6 months later, for my birthday, her old flip phone that barely worked. The screen was cracked and half the buttons stuck. But my parents acted like they were doing me some huge favor. It was the same story with clothes. Jessica would get shopping trips to the mall, coming home with bags full of new stuff. Then, a year later, when she decided those clothes weren't cool anymore, they'd end up in my closet. I spent middle school wearing her hand-me-downs that were either too big or completely out of style. Birthday parties were brutal. 2. Jessica's parties were these huge events with professional decorations and catered food. Mine were usually just a few friends, pizza from the cheap place, and a grocery store cake. The message was clear from early on. Jessica was the important one. The one with potential. The one worth investing in. I was just there, existing in the background, grateful for whatever scraps fell my way. When I was 14, Jessica finally left for college. My parents drove her to this expensive private school, 3 states away, crying and hugging her like she was going off to war. I remember thinking that finally, maybe now they'd notice me. Maybe now I'd be the important one. I was so wrong about that. Even with Jessica gone, nothing changed. If anything, it got worse. Mom and Dad called her every single day. Sometimes twice. They'd sit at the kitchen table with the phone on speaker, asking about her classes, her friends, dorm room, what she ate for breakfast. These calls would go on for hours. Every other weekend. They'd drive 3 states away to visit her. They'd come back with stories about how wonderful she was doing, how popular she was, how her professors loved her. They'd bring back photos of Jessica at campus events. Jessica with her new friends. Jessica looking happy and successful. The money thing was insane. They were constantly sending her cash for everything: new clothes, textbooks, going out with friends, spring break trips. I'd hear Mom on the phone saying things like, "Of course. Sweetie, I'll transfer $500 right now." Woo bae. That was more than I'd ever seen at once. Meanwhile, I was still wearing Jessica's old clothes and using her beat-up school supplies when I needed something. Even something basic like new sneakers when mine had holes. I'd get a lecture about being wasteful and not appreciating what I had. When I turned 16, I'd had enough. I got a job at the local grocery store, bagging groceries and stocking shelves after school. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Finally, I could buy my own things without having to beg or settle for Jessica's leftovers. I worked all through junior and senior year, saving every penny I could while other kids were going to parties or hanging out at the mall. I was working, but I didn't mind. I had a goal. Now, I was going to college, and I was going to do it myself. 2 years later, Jessica graduated and moved back home. Perfect timing because I was graduating from high school and ready to start the next chapter of my life. I've been working on college applications for months, doing everything myself since my parents were too busy fawning over Jessica's return. I applied to 8 different colleges, researching each one online and filling out all the paperwork during my lunch breaks at work. I even paid for the application fees myself. When the acceptance letters started coming in, I was shocked. I got into 5 schools, which felt like a miracle. The best option was the local state college. They offered me a partial scholarship that covered 70% of the tuition. It wasn't full coverage, but it was something. The remaining 30% would be expensive. But I thought maybe, just maybe, my parents would help me out. After all, and they'd been paying Jessica's full tuition for 4 years. I decided to tell them about it at dinner. Jessica was there, too, fresh from her college graduation, already talking about some internship she'd landed. I waited until there was a break in the conversation about how amazing Jessica was. "I have some good news," I said, trying to sound confident. "I got accepted to state college, and they offered me a partial scholarship. It covers 70% of the tuition." I expected them to be proud, maybe even excited. Instead, Dad snorted and shook his head. "College? You don't need college. Veronica, you need to get a real job and start working." Mom laughed. Actually laughed. "Honey, you're not cut out for college. You're meant for physical labor, not book learning. That's just who you are." I felt like I'd been slapped. "What do you mean? I'm not cut out for it. I got accepted. They offered me a scholarship." That's when Jessica chimed in, and her words cut deeper than anything my parents had said. "Oh, please," she said, giggling. "You're way too stupid for college. You don't have the brains to handle the coursework. You'd just flunk out anyway." Even for them, this felt like too much. I'd gotten used to being ignored, to being second choice, to getting hand-me-downs. But this was different. This was them telling me I was worthless, that I didn't deserve the same chances they'd given Jessica. I stopped talking. There was no point in arguing or trying to convince them. I could see it in their faces. They really believed what they were saying. They really thought I was stupid and worthless. I sat there for the rest of dinner, not saying another word. Jessica kept chattering about her internship and her plans, while my parents hung on every word. Nobody asked me anything else about college or my scholarship. That night, lying in bed, I made a decision. I was going to college. Whether they supported me or not, I'd find a way to pay for it myself. I'd work more hours, take out loans, whatever it took. I wasn't going to let them decide my future for me. After that dinner, I threw myself into work like my life depended on it. I picked up extra shifts at the grocery store and found a second job cleaning offices downtown on weekends. The work was exhausting, but every dollar I saved got me closer to my goal. My parents acted like nothing had happened. They went back to their usual routine of obsessing over Jessica, who was now living in their house rent-free while doing her internship. She'd sleep until noon, leave her dishes everywhere, and complain about how hard her life was. Meanwhile, I was working 60 hours a week and saving every penny. The math was brutal. Even with the scholarship covering 70%, I still needed about $8. Zero. For my first year between tuition, books, and basic living expenses. It felt impossible. But I kept working and saving, telling myself I'd figure it out somehow. Summer flew by in a blur of work and stress. 2 weeks before classes were supposed to start, Mom dropped a bomb on me. I was eating a quick breakfast before my morning shift when she walked into the kitchen with this fake sweet smile. "Veronica, we need to talk," she said, sitting down across from me. "Jessica needs more space. She wants to turn your room into a dressing room. You know how much clothes she has from college?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "But I'm starting college in 2 weeks. I was planning to live here and commute to save money." "Mom Schrogel, maybe this is a sign that college isn't the right path for you. You could get a full-time job instead." "I'm not giving up on college. Then you'll have to figure it out yourself. Jessica needs that room. And frankly, it would be better for everyone if you moved out. You're always working anyway, so you're hardly ever here." I wanted to scream after everything they'd put me through. Now they were literally throwing me out so Jessica could have a bigger closet. But I kept my voice steady. "When do I need to be out?" "This weekend would be good. That gives you a few days to find somewhere." I called my friend Maya during my lunch break. We've been friends since middle school, and she was one of the few people who knew how messed up my family situation was. "I need to find a place fast. Do you know anyone with a spare room?" "Actually, yeah. I'm renting this tiny apartment with 2 other girls, Sarah and Kim. It's pretty crappy, but we could probably squeeze in a 4th person. The rent would be cheaper for everyone. Come look at it after work." The apartment was definitely a dump. It was in the worst part of town, with thin walls, a leaky ceiling, and a kitchen that barely functioned. But it was a roof over my head, and Maya and her roommates were genuinely nice people. That weekend, I packed everything I owned into garbage bags and boxes. My parents were out visiting Jessica at her internship, so I didn't even have to deal with a goodbye. I left a note on the kitchen table saying I'd moved out and giving them Maya's address in case they needed to reach me. They never called. Starting college while working 2 jobs and living in a crappy apartment was harder than I'd imagined. I was exhausted all the time, running on maybe 4 hours of sleep a night. I'd work the morning shift at the grocery store, go to classes, then clean offices until late at night. The other girls in the apartment were lifesavers. Maya was studying education, Sarah was in nursing school, and Kim was doing business. We all understood what it was like to struggle. So we helped each other, however we could. When I couldn't afford groceries, they'd share their food. When I fell asleep at the kitchen table while studying, they'd cover me with a blanket. But even with their help, I was barely surviving. I lived on ramen noodles and whatever free food I could find on campus. My clothes were falling apart and I couldn't afford to replace them. I walked to school every day because I couldn't afford gas for my beat-up car. I bought used textbooks online and photocopying pages at the library when I couldn't afford the whole book. About a year into college, I had the worst encounter with my family yet. I was walking downtown after finishing my shift at the grocery store, when I literally ran into them coming out of a restaurant. They'd been having lunch together, all dressed up and looking happy. The look on their faces when they saw me was pure shock. I knew I looked terrible. I'd lost weight from barely eating. My clothes were old and worn, and I was exhausted from working double shifts. "Oh my God," Jessica said, staring at me. "You look awful." "Thanks," I said, trying to walk past them. "No. Seriously," she continued laughing. "You look like a homeless person. Are you living on the streets?" Dad was looking me up and down with disgust. "This is what happens when you make poor choices." "Veronica, you look like a beggar," Mom said, shaking her head. "This is embarrassing." Jessica was still giggling. "If I had some spare change, I'd totally give it to you. You look like you need it." That comment hit me like a punch to the gut. My own sister talking to me like I was a stranger on the street asking for money. I felt humiliated and angry at the same time. They walked away, still laughing and making comments about how pathetic I looked. I stood there on the sidewalk, shaking with rage and humiliation. People were staring at me, probably wondering why I was crying in the middle of downtown. That night, I made a promise to myself I was going to succeed. I was going to graduate, get a good job, and prove to all of them that I wasn't a failure. I was going to show them exactly who the real loser was. I doubled down on everything. I studied harder, worked more hours, and pushed myself beyond what I thought was possible. My grades were already good, but I made them better. I started volunteering for extra credit projects and building relationships with my professors. Those 3 years flew by faster than I expected. I kept my head down, worked my ass off, and somehow managed to graduate with honors. The day I walked across that stage, none of my family was there. My parents cheered for me instead. And honestly, it meant more coming from people who actually cared. My professors had noticed my work ethic and grades. Dr. Martinez, my business professor, helped me land interviews at several companies. "You're exactly the kind of employee every company needs," she told me. "Hardworking, reliable, and smart. Don't let anyone tell you different." The job offers started coming in during my final semester. I picked a marketing position at a mid-sized company downtown. The salary was more money than I'd ever seen, and they offered good benefits too. After years of living on ramen and stress, I finally felt like I could breathe. I moved out of the crappy apartment and into a decent one-bedroom place. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I had a real bed instead of the air mattress I'd been sleeping on for years. I could afford groceries without counting every penny. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was actually living instead of just surviving. Work was amazing. I threw myself into every project, staying late, volunteering for extra assignments, coming up with new ideas. My boss, Jennifer, was impressed from day one. Within a year, I got promoted to senior marketing specialist with a nice raise. The money kept getting better. I was saving aggressively, putting away almost half of every paycheck. I had a goal now. I wanted to buy a house. Not just any house, but a nice one. The kind of house that would make it clear I'd made something of myself. My Ed Carroll was the only family member who stayed in touch with me. She'd call every few months to check in. And sometimes, she'd share family news. I never asked about my parents or Jessica. But Carol would tell me anyway. "Your sister got married last year," she told me during one of our calls. "Some guy she met at her internship. They had a big wedding at the country club." "Good for her," I said. "Not really." "Meaning it? They're living with your parents now. Jessica's husband lost his job, so money's tight. She's been complaining about it at every family gathering." I didn't say anything to that. Part of me wanted to ask more, but I reminded myself that their problems weren't my problems anymore. She had a baby last year. 2. Carol continued. "A little girl, and she's pregnant again. 2 kids and living with my parents." I almost felt sorry for Jessica, but then I remembered how she treated me, and the feeling passed. "What do they say about me?" I asked, even though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Carol sighed. "They tell people you're living in the slums somewhere. Your mother says you look terrible whenever anyone asks. Jessica likes to say you probably went downhill after college." I laughed at that. "Do they know I graduated? I don't think so. They never ask about you directly." Work continued to go well. I got another promotion, this time to marketing manager. The raise was substantial, and I was finally making the kind of money I dreamed about when I was eating ramen every night. I started looking at houses seriously. I spent months researching neighborhoods, looking at listings, figuring out what I could afford. I wanted something that would make a statement, not huge or flashy, but clearly nice. The kind of place that would make it obvious I'd succeeded. When I turned 29, I celebrated with Mai and a few work friends. We went to a nice restaurant, the kind of place I never could have afforded before. It felt surreal to order whatever I wanted without looking at the prices. A week later, I found the perfect house. It was in a great neighborhood, modern and spacious, with a big kitchen and a beautiful backyard. The realtor could tell I was serious, and we moved fast on the paperwork. The day I signed the papers, I felt like I was floating. I owned a house. I spent the next few weeks buying furniture and decorating. I took my time picking out exactly what I wanted. Everything was new. Everything was mine. No hand-me-downs. No second-hand furniture. No making do with whatever I could afford. I called Carol to tell her about the house. I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. "You bought a house," she said, sounding shocked. "That's wonderful. I'm so proud of you." "Thanks. I'm planning a housewarming party next month. I'd love for you to come." "Of course I'll be there." This is such exciting news. I should have known Carol wouldn't be able to keep it to herself. Looking back, I'm not even sure I wanted her to. Maybe part of me wanted my family to know I'd made it. 2 weeks later, I was unpacking the last boxes when I heard the doorbell ring. I wasn't expecting anyone, and I definitely wasn't expecting to open the door and find my parents and Jessica standing on my porch. For a moment, I just stared at them. They looked older, more tired than I remembered. Jessica was clearly pregnant again, and she looked stressed. "Hi, Veronica," Mom said, like we just talked yesterday. I didn't invite them in, but they pushed past me anyway. Walking into my house, like they owned the place, I watched them look around, taking in the new furniture, the nice finishes, the obvious signs that I was doing well. Jessica's eyes were wide with what looked like envy. "How did you afford all this work?" I said simply, "This is a really nice place." Dad said, sounding surprised. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "We heard you bought a house," Mom said. "We wanted to see it. I didn't invite you." They all laughed at that. "We're family," Dad said. "We don't need invitations." I was about to tell them they weren't acting like family, when Mom looked around again and said something that made my blood run cold. "This is a lovely house, Veronica. But it doesn't really suit you." "Does it? It's more Jessica's style." I stared at my mother, trying to process what she just said. "What do you mean?" "It doesn't suit me." Mom walked around my living room like she was inspecting it. "Well, it's just so nice. And Jessica really needs a place like this. She has 2 children and another one coming. So maybe you should give her the house." I actually laughed out loud. "Are you insane? Think about it," Dad said, sitting down on my new couch without permission. "You got this house easily. Jessica's married with kids. She needs it more than you do." Easily. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I worked my ass off for this house. I worked 2 jobs through college while living in a dump. I saved every penny for years. Jessica was looking around with obvious jealousy. "It's not fair that you get to live somewhere this nice, when I'm stuck in that tiny room at Mom and Dad's. Then maybe you and your husband should get your own place." "We can't afford it," she whined. "Mark, been between jobs and with the kids." "Not my problem." Mom stepped closer to me. "This could be your chance to come back to the family. Veronica, you could prove you care about us by doing this one thing for Jessica." I looked at all 3 of them. My parents, who had thrown me out so Jessica could have a bigger closet. Jessica, who'd called me stupid and said I looked like a beggar. They were standing in my house, the house I'd worked myself to death to afford, demanding I give it away. "I need to make a phone call," I said. "Then we can continue this conversation." They all smiled at each other, thinking I was actually considering their ridiculous demand. I walked into my bedroom and called 911. "I need police at my house," I said quietly. "There are people here demanding I give them my property. Are they threatening you?" "Ma'am, they're not leaving when I ask them to. And they're demanding I sign over my house to them. We'll send someone right away." I hung up and walked back to the living room. Jessica was already planning out loud. The master bedroom would be perfect for Mark and me. She was saying, and the kids could each have their own room. Finally, the backyard is great for children too, Mom added. "I'm glad you like it," I said calmly. Dad nodded. "So you'll do it. You'll transfer the house to Jessica. Let's wait and see." 5 minutes later, there was a knock on the door. I opened it to find 2 police officers standing there. "Ma'am, we got a call about a property dispute." "Yes. Thank you for coming so quickly." I pointed to my family. "These people are in my house demanding I give it to them. They claim to be my relatives, but I don't know them." My parents' faces went bright red. Dad jumped up from the couch where her parents. He shouted, "This is our daughter, and I'm her sister," Jessica added. I looked at the officers calmly. I've never seen these people before in my life. They came to my door claiming they deserve my house and they won't leave. Mom was sputtering. "Veronica, what are you doing? Where are your family officers?" I said, Could you please escort these strangers off my property? The police flipped back and forth between us, clearly trying to figure out what was going on. Finally, one of them spoke up. Regardless of your relationship, ma'am, if you're asking them to leave your property and they're refusing, we need to ask them to go. This is insane, Jessica screamed. She's being completely unreasonable. You need to leave now, the officer said firmly. My parents and Jessica had no choice but to head toward the door. As they were leaving, Mom turned back to me. You've completely cut yourself off from your family, she said. I hope you're happy. I watched them walk to their car, Jessica still ranting about how unfair everything was. As they drove away, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Pure, complete relief. I stood in my living room, looking around at everything I'd worked for my house, my furniture, my life that I'd built from nothing. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. 2 weeks later, Carol called me. Your parents are telling everyone you've lost your mind, she said. They're saying you're greedy and unstable. What do you think? Carol laughed. I think you finally stood up for yourself. Good for you. Will you still come to my housewarming party? Wouldn't miss it. The party was exactly what I wanted. Maya came with her boyfriend. My work friends showed up, and Carol brought a bottle of expensive wine. We ate good food, drank good drinks, and celebrated in my beautiful house to Veronica, Maya said, raising her glass for proving that hard work and determination can overcome anything. Everyone cheered, and I felt surrounded by people who actually cared about me, people who'd supported me when I needed it, who celebrated my successes without jealousy or conditions. As the evening wound down and people started leaving, I walked through my house, turning off lights in every room. I felt proud of what I'd accomplished. This wasn't just a house. It was proof that I'd survived everything they'd thrown at me and come out stronger. My phone rang as I was getting ready for bed. I saw it was my parents' number and almost didn't answer. But curiosity got the better of me. What I said, Veronica, please. Mom's voice was pleading. Can't we work this out? Family should stick together. You're right, I said. Family should stick together. Too bad I don't have any family. I hung up and blocked their number. Then I blocked Jessica's number till the next morning. I woke up in my own house, in my own bed, surrounded by things I'd earned through my own hard work. I made coffee in my kitchen and sat in my backyard, planning out what I wanted to plant in the garden for the first time in my life. I felt completely at peace. I'd learned something important. You can't choose the family you're born into, but you can choose the family you keep. And sometimes the best choice is to walk away and build something better on your own.